hours to reassemble this vehicle and drive it away. Joey has what's called a cam bolt. It's used on the upper control arm of the suspension to adjust alignment, the camber, and whatever that other adjustment is for the front tires. Upon reinstallation, we messed up the threads a little bit, so Joey's just going through and fixing up the threads. These are tap and die sets. These are the tools that you use to make internal and external threads. I'm trying to use them now to clean up the threads on the bolt, but they shouldn't be confused with a thread restoration kit, which can only fix existing threads that have been damaged. In theory, these taps and dies could be used to turn a smooth hole into a threaded hole or a smooth shaft into a threaded shaft. Ahmad over here is taking the old outer tie rod ends and removing them and counting the number of turns that it takes to remove them off the old tie rods, and he is threading those tie rod ends onto the new power steering rack that we've purchased so that we can install that. Power steering rack will go here, but it's there on the ground. So what we want to do is put these two forces as close to the same side as we can to eliminate bending moments. Because these two forces are on the same side of the bar, they shouldn't make a torque. Whereas if I had put a force down here, we'd have a tendency to translate. So now the only degree of freedom should be rotation about the axis of the tie rod. So we go, that's 1, 2, 20 turns. Dad, originally one of the things that I'd hoped to get done was replace these rusty backer plates. These are used to prevent direct contact between, the splash of the road and whatnot on your brake rotors, slows down rust a little bit, protects the parking brake and whatnot. Anyways, they've rusted out significantly, and I'd hoped to remove them when I had the axle off, but I forgot. So I tried to have Dad do it. We never got it all the way, and it's just going to take too long to finish it out. So instead, we're going to reassemble it and punt and change those at a later date. Dad needs to thread a grounding screw into a hole on the housing of the power steering rack. But whoever rebuilt the power steering rack just painted the whole thing willy-nilly without plugging the threaded holes, which means he's having a hard time driving this in. He wants to make sure he doesn't cross-thread it and ruin the hole. Okay, it's 1.0. It's an M7 by 1.0, Dad. Nearly all screws, particularly the ones that adhere to the unified specification, so that's like UNC, that's unified course, or UNF, unified fine. They all are all defined by a major diameter of the bolt and the pitch. That's the distance between the threads. And so basically what I just did is I took the screw that's supposed to go in the hole, which should have the same threads, and I measured the outside diameter to figure out the major diameter. We determined with digital calipers, and it measured 6.3 millimeters, which nominally would round up. That's probably an M7 bolt, so major diameter of 7 millimeters nominally. And then the threads must have just gotten knocked down a little bit at some point. And then I took this thread pitch gauge, which lets you measure the distance between threads to determine what the thread pitch was. And so now that we have the diameter and the thread pitch, he was able to determine which tool he needs to run down those threads to cut out the paint without cutting out any of the metal.
It's a positive. Watch out, this could shoot you in the head. Hit you in the face or knock all your teeth out.
Done. Yeah, it looks like you were.
It does.
Beautiful.
I'll hold him.
Come through. Good. So far, we have managed to replace the lower control arm, upper control arm, and inner and outer tie rod ends on the passenger side of the vehicle. We're in the process of installing the power steering rack and pinion, and then once we do that, we will install the new front suspension components, lower control arm, upper control arm, our linkage on the driver's side. And then we'll purge the power steering, and then we'll put the tires on. Work that still needs to be done: new leaf springs, replace the oil pan gasket, replace the backing plates for the rear axle. This is called the power steering rack and pinion. You know how you can turn your car with just a pinky? This is the device that lets you do that. This is the power steering return line. There is fluid that gets pushed out of the rack and pinion, and it's at a low pressure, and it has to go back up to your power steering reservoir where it can get cycled back through. Right now, when I release this channel lock, there is nothing between the power steering fluid that's in the reservoir and the earth, and so it's going to start flowing out of this pipe. All right. Actually, why did I do that? That was dumb. That was a dumb move. I'm prone to those.
Why was it dumb?
Well, because what I really need to do is move this back far enough that I can jam the rubber unimpeded onto the barb fitting. We need to stretch the rubber over that.
Okay.
And if I have this metal hose clamp, the rubber won't be able to stretch over it. We'll have constrained the diameter, which is too bad because the clamp's in the way, so this will be messy. Here we go. So far, no power steering fluid, which I don't know if that's good or bad. Probably bad. Okay, great. Our rack and pinion has been hooked back up. Now we just need to tighten down the mounting bolts and we'll be on to purging. Purging is when you get rid of all the air in the system. For this nut,
Okay.
and that nut, we are torquing the rack and pinion mounting bolts down to spec. The torque wrench here will make a beeping sound when we get close and a solid sound when we have hit the spec. We're close. That, a little more. There it is.
Water.
So now we are reattaching the steering column to the power steering rack. I'm going to remove this lower portion of the steering column so that I can pull the yoke out and I can hopefully open up the clamping mechanism a little bit. We ended up getting the power steering rack and pinion installed, and we got it purged, and we decided there just wasn't enough time left in the day to get the rest of the front suspension installed. So we decided to clean up, call it quits. We'll be back next week and we'll finish installing the front suspension, get some brakes adjusted, install some little odds and ends here and there, and we'll be on our merry way.